Welcome to Saddleworth. It's something of a disputed territory between Lancashire and Yorkshire. Thanks to the Local Government Act of 1972 and the creation of Greater Manchester and West Yorkshire, Saddleworth, which up to that point had been part of the West Riding, was lost to Yorkshire and became part of Oldham and Greater Manchester. That still rankles with some as well. There's even a White Rose Society campaigning to have it returned.
And it's hard country too. The Pennines are brutal, severe, isolated. In winter, the weather is really treacherous. And in fact, when they were building the M62 motorway in the 1970s, the weather was so bad, the terrain so difficult, it had real problems with construction. The Pennines form a spine at the centre of the north of England, separating the two great historical counties of Lancashire and Yorkshire. Over there, Lancashire, Oldham, Rochdale, Manchester, Warrington and Liverpool. And over there, Yorkshire, Leeds, Bradford, York and Hull. And between them, the occasional road, the motorway and this Standish Tunnel, a genuine behemoth of railway tunnels.
At 3 miles and 60 yards in length and ignoring the Channel Tunnel, Standish Tunnel ranks at number 3 behind the Severn Tunnel and Totley Tunnel near Sheffield. The tunnel used today is the newest of 3. The present one dates from 1894. But there is also an 1848 and an 1871 tunnel, and although both of those are closed to trains, they are still maintained for access purposes.
There's also this. It's also called Standish Tunnel, but it's on the Huddersfield Narrow Canal. It runs parallel to the railway, 3¼ miles, single bore from here at Diggle through to Marsden. I wouldn't advise it if you're suffering from claustrophobia.
So why come up high on the Pennine Moors to look at old railway tunnels? The answer is because addressing links across the Pennines is critical if you want to upgrade transport links between the Northern Powerhouse cities of Liverpool, Manchester and Leeds.
And there have been plans to do just that for some time. Now, the idea of a Northern Powerhouse is really down to George Osborne when he was Chancellor of the Exchequer. During a speech symbolically given here at the Manchester Museum of Science and Industry in June 2014, George Osborne said this: "There is a hard truth we need to address. The cities of the north are individually strong, but collectively not strong enough. The whole is less than the sum of the parts, so the powerhouse of London dominates more and more. And that's not healthy for our economy. It's not good for our country. We need a northern powerhouse too. Not one city, but a collection of northern cities, sufficiently close to each other that combined they can take on the world, able to provide jobs and opportunities and security to the many, many people who live here and for whom this is all about. We need to bring the cities of the north together as a team. That's how Britain will beat the rest."
And so the concept of the Northern Powerhouse was born, as was Northern Powerhouse Rail. It didn't appear fully formed. Like all these things, it took a while to form and mature, but by 2019 it was pretty well developed, and it included a new line from Liverpool to Manchester, a brand new high-speed line from Manchester to Leeds, which included a new tunnel through the Pennines and building a new through station in Bradford, and upgrades of the lines to Sheffield and Hull, along with electrification. Lots of electrification. But critically, it also integrated into HS2. HS2 was going to be built between London and Manchester via a western leg and London to Leeds via an eastern leg. And Osborne's new high-speed line between Manchester and Leeds joined at the dots, an HS3 if you like. So did that mean the line here through Saddleworth, the main Transpennine link for over 100 years, was going to be forgotten? Not a bit of it. Electrification of this route, together with substantial upgrades, were also planned. In fact, electrification of the line from Manchester to Leeds was first officially announced in the autumn statement of 2011. And although it took a while to progress, today the electrification of the entire route between Manchester and York is a core part of the Transpennine Route Upgrade. However, Osborne's vision proved to be the high watermark for the North's railway so far. In 2021, Boris Johnson and his Transport Secretary Grant Shapps announced the Integrated Rail Plan, basically an excuse to justify cancelling the eastern leg of HS2 to Leeds. And HS3, the bold vision of a new high-speed line from Manchester to Leeds, that got trimmed back as well. Oddly, there was still planned to be a new line from Manchester through a new tunnel under the Pennines, But instead of carrying on through Bradford to Leeds, it would instead rejoin the existing line between Marsden and Huddersfield, just the other side of the Pennines in Yorkshire. And if that wasn't bad enough, Rishi Sunak really stuck the knife in 2023 by cancelling HS2 from Birmingham to Manchester. His highly controversial decision was not just a disaster for the congested West Coast Main Line, but potentially also for Northern Powerhouse Rail as well. Despite Sunak telling everyone that money would still be made available for a new line from Liverpool to Manchester, the business case for any such new line was always likely to have depended on it cohabiting with HS2 trains in the complex and expensive tunnel section between Manchester Airport and Manchester Piccadilly. And now, with HS2 gone, was that ever going to be justified? The so-called Network North announcement also promised a new rail connection between Bradford and Manchester via Huddersfield, with dramatic reductions in journey times. This suggested that some of the new line aspirations from the integrated rail plan, such as the new line from Manchester to Marsden, had survived, but there was no detail. And anyway, Network North was greeted with considerable scepticism by many. It looked like we'd have to make do with Transpennine Route Upgrade. And yet, it turns out that's not such a bad thing after all, because despite all the constant chopping and changing with vision and strategy for the North Railway, the Transpennine Route Upgrade has kept going and is doing a rather marvellous job of it as well. The Transpennine Route Upgrade may yet turn out to be the jewel in the crown and the foundation on which any resurrection of Northern Powerhouse Rail takes place. So what is Transpennine Route Upgrade, or TRU for short? In simple terms, it's an £11 billion multi-phase upgrade of the entire railway between Manchester and York via Leeds, involving capacity improvements, speed improvements, station enhancements and in some places brand new stations, freight upgrades, electrification, new rolling stock and digital signalling. In short, barring the building of a completely brand new railway, it's as close to a total transformation as you can get. And what's perhaps even more impressive is that they've kept the railway running whilst they do it. So over £100 million has been invested in diversionary routes, such as through the Calder Valley, and the lines through Wakefield, Normanton and Castleford. That means many journeys have remained possible by train even when major engineering works are underway. Replacement buses are still required from time to time, but the approach of upgrading complementary rail routes is excellent. James Richardson is Managing Director of the Transpennine Route Upgrade for Network Rail, and Tricia Williams is the Managing Director of Northern Trains. Between them and with colleagues from Transpennine Express, they are the leadership team that has overall responsibility for this extraordinary project. And towards the end of 2025, I went to see them in the project offices in Leeds to chat a bit more about what is planned and how it's being done. I started with the most obvious question of all. What difference will TRU make?
So the core objective, if we start what we're trying to service, so basically we've got nearly 15 million people across the north of England that are connected to this route. What we're trying to do is improve their journey times, improve their actual reliability of the railway in the north of England, and really connect the cities, firstly York, Leeds and Manchester, in a much more seamless way to actually enable their journeys to be reliable, on time, and actually reduce the actual journey time between them. But also unlock right along the corridor economic growth and really social benefit for the entire area of the north itself.
I think for us and TPE, it is about the modernisation of that wonderful railway across the north. So you look at the investment that we're getting in stations, we're already seeing some of that. Electrification, so that brings a greener way for people to travel across the north. Newer trains, so both ourselves and Transpennine will take the benefit of electrification and invest in new trains across the journeys. So all of that gives customers more trust, I think, in the ability to move between these fantastic cities.
Yeah, so what we'll be putting in place at completion will be one fast and one semi-fast extra train per...
In addition.
Extra, yeah, per hour. And that'll increase the capacity along with the actual speed improvements of around about 30%. So that's a vast increase in capacity of the actual network itself, coupled with the reliability, which we're anticipating being 50% better performance-wise, those coupled together are going to see a massive improvement for the actual north of England.
And what about freight? Because freight you often hear, oh yeah, and freight. But has freight been a core part of your thinking with this project? Does it benefit?
Yeah, so freight is a key part of the project. It's a key part of what the end out aim will be from a benefits overall. And what we're looking at is we'll have 15 new freight paths across the Pennines per day. And to give some type of scale for that, that's about 1,000 lorries that will be either taken off the road or it's increased capacity. I think that's where it links in where TRU does sit on a footprint which is York, Leeds and Manchester. But actually, if you look at the ports that'll be affected, Liverpool, Teesport, across Birmingham, across to Hull, all those will benefit from that increased freight capacity.
The project is being delivered in sections, which makes sense, but overall, it has a strong benefit-cost ratio. And beyond that, the project is really investing in local communities along the line of route, as James explains.
Yeah, so we've got the what I would call relatively standard way of appraising the actual route itself with regard to that, and we're well over 1.5 as a BCR. But beyond that, we've committed to investing 50 pence in every pound to the local communities, working with them on social value. That's actually making sure, as I said, we're investing with local businesses to improve their capacity and capability. With regard to the appraisal and actually looking at what the effect is on the way through, yes, we're working with some of the local authorities, in particular Huddersfield, where we've looked at the investment that's been brought into this local area since the commitment of the programme in 2020. And we've already seen a pipeline of investment of 700 million that's being committed in that area. So we are trying to not only appraise on the standard format, but actually understand moreover what the benefits are.
One of the most impressive pieces of work so far has been taking place at Huddersfield. There are multiple significant blockades planned there, and when I visited, it was the 30-day blockade during September 2025 that had been completed.
How did that go? I mean, it was 30 days. It was a big exercise.
To make that blockade really work, it has taken all parts of the rail industry to make it successful. It's gone very, very well. We have delivered all the work we anticipated, which was extensive improvements to Huddersfield Station, 4 large bridges actually constructed during that period, as well as actually a large amount of track laid right the way through that Huddersfield area. It was a really important part of the programme because in essence it's a little bit like working in a very fine Swiss watch, this. Because if we're not careful, if we start to tamper with one part, that has effect across the entire network. So it is a very critical and important part to the next 4 or 5 years of the programme itself. So a very successful period of time. Passengers wise, just to give you an idea, we've already invested around £100 million in diversion routes, and that enables us to unlock these kind of blockades because they allow us actually to move passengers effectively around the network while actually these blockades and closed off areas of the network are. And I think that's been our focus to make sure that we do have the capability to keep passengers moving when we're doing this huge amount of work. We have done that. We've seen a slight drop off, as you'd expect, with regard to some usage, but that's coming back, and we generally find that actually comes back very quickly after the blockade.
So you're seeing some drop off as a result of the Huddersfield?
A small amount.
A small amount, right, okay.
And what's tend to happen is I think you're actually seeing an increase in some of your services, aren't you?
Yeah, so exactly that. So James mentioned the enterprise, probably worth just mentioning that. So within the TRU programme, we've got the programme team themselves, but that's made up of a number of other companies. So Network Rail, Transpennine Express, ourselves, together with Department of Transport, etc. So when we do the diversionary work to enable a blockade like Huddersfield, which was 4 weeks, at the end of summer, so not insignificant planning, we work very closely with Transpennine Express to make sure that we can keep customers moving. So that's our main aim. Now, sometimes we have to put on a rail replacement, but we tend to try and flood the area with people to help. So you can, and you see that as you're coming through the stations. And so we actually have seen an increase in revenue, an increase in journeys for us as people are using the diversionary route that you would normally see a northern train on.
Calder Valley then?
It's principally the Calder Valley
Right.
for this blockade. Now, what Transpennine have put services through the Calder Valley, and we've strengthened our services.
Brilliant.
But the journey time is slightly longer than people would expect. So we've seen a reduction from a Transpennine Express point of view, but an increase in Northern. So overall, the aim is that we sort of net neutral, and it's gone really, really well. Now, one of the things we need to do is now look at what are the lessons learned from that. We did see a drop-off on reliability. Now, you would expect to see some of that. So what were the causes of that reliability that we weren't expecting, and how do we make that better for the next time?
It does mean that until all the work at Huddersfield is complete, direct services between Bradford, Halifax, Brighouse and Huddersfield are suspended, and that will last until January 2027. So managing communication with passengers and stakeholders is critically important.
We already mentioned the customer satisfaction scores. We've seen the highest level of those in the last 3 periods. And that's because I think people are starting to understand the scheme and actually what it's potentially bringing to them. One key thing we've been looking at is, because you're absolutely right, infrastructure schemes of this nature in a live network environment are notoriously difficult for the passengers and the people moving around. We've spoken about the enterprise. That's an important part of putting that passenger first as part of that. And it's about recognising and sharing with them what the incremental improvements are as well. Because our significant improvement comes in 2030 when we start to see timetable change, which will really have a significant impact on the passenger and help them. Up until that point, it's about more reliability, better stations. It's about actually showing them that there are improvements as we go through these blockade periods. Because just to give you an idea, Huddersfield was a big blockade, a really important blockade. Over the next 12 months, we've got another 6 blockades of a similar nature. And so therefore, it's keeping the customer with us over those periods of time and seeing what the incremental benefit is before the big change.
That is going to test people's patience, isn't it?
That's our biggest challenge.
Yeah. Now, not long after I went to Huddersfield and saw the work they'd done on the blockade there, Ravensthorpe Station, which is just over there in the distance, was closed. That won't reopen until 2028, and when it does, it'll be 200 metres further down the line. One of the things they're doing, which is extremely impressive, is in order to create a 4-track railway across this section here, they're building a brand new 350-metre viaduct, the Baker Viaduct. You can just start to see the pillars in the distance. I can't walk through here because it's being closed off as they're doing the work. But you can tell that it's going to be absolutely amazing when it's done, and it will form part of a grade-separated flyover all the way back to Calder Road there. So over the Calder, the River Calder here, and then back as far as the junction. It's going to be something else when it's done.
And the milestones keep coming. The upgrade to Murfield Station has just been completed with new step-free access, longer platforms and improved facilities. The platform remodelling here will also facilitate the installation of the 2 new fast lines through this stretch of railway, boosting capacity and reliability of services. All this new infrastructure is great, but when will passengers really notice the change, a big change in their journeys? Well, the first really big change comes in 2030, with the introduction of a new timetable able to make use of the new trains and the core infrastructure that will have been built by then. But even then, the section from Huddersfield to Stalybridge on the Manchester side of the Pennines won't be complete, and it won't be electrified. All that won't be done until 2034. So is there not a risk of customer and stakeholder fatigue whilst they wait?
We are going to disrupt the service for a number of years, and I think given the scale of the infrastructure that we're going to build, it's clearly we're trying to manage that in every way we can and make sure the passenger isn't overly disrupted by that. But in essence, we are going through a stage, and that's in some parts why there's quite a long programme. So if we look at the infrastructure stages, we'll see a significant improvement in 2030 when the timetable changes happen. And that will be and they'll also see the reliability improve over the course of building up to that point in time. We then go through the next stage, whereas the final piece of the infrastructure between Huddersfield and Staley Bridge is completed. Again, reliability improved. We get more capacity into that railway. And so therefore, the whole of the railway starts to operate in a more effective way, in a more reliable way. We then go through the digital stage, and we're using digital here in a slightly different way, we're not mimicking the existing network. We're actually looking at this as a new piece of work with regard to actually how we implement the digital system. And that's going to drive the journey times down again, which is going to be, passengers will feel that significant change. So they will see that incremental change to go through, as well as actually new rolling stock coming in. So our main thing is to keep our passengers with us, make sure they're really informed, and make sure they understand those stages as we go through what the improvements will be.
All of this does sound good, and it's impressive to see a project that's just cracking on with it, on time and on budget according to the project team. Yet, TRU was never supposed to be what it was all about. That was Northern Powerhouse Rail, or NPR. Well, the government announced on the 14th of January 2026 that NPR would finally be going ahead. The £45 billion scheme had finally got the green light. So does that mean George Osborne's original vision for NPR, of which TRU is an important part, is now back on track? Sadly not, and for a number of reasons. First, Osborne's vision was for a transport network in the north fully integrated into the high-speed network connecting the north with the south, HS2, and that's gone. Second, his vision for Manchester to Leeds was for a new high-speed line. That too has gone, although intriguingly, a National Audit Office report from the 11th of March 2026 noted the Department for Transport still have a brand new line from Manchester to Marsden in their Phase 3 plans for NPR. But Phase 3 is years away, perhaps even decades, and the DFT didn't even mention it in the 14th of January 2026 announcement, so hardly a ringing endorsement. Third, whilst a new station may open in Bradford, it will not be on a new high-speed line, although it could be that the possible reopening of the Pickle Bridge line between Wyke and Brighouse is the means by which Manchester to Bradford services via Huddersfield are sped up, as suggested in Phase 3 of NPR. Fourth, a new Liverpool to Manchester railway may well be built, but there are still many unanswered questions about how to deal with other major bottlenecks in Manchester, and whether to fund Andy Burnham's vision of a brand new underground Manchester Piccadilly station. And fifth, only £1.1 billion has been definitely committed. The rest of the £45 billion is still subject to business cases and being affordable in future spending reviews. Don't get me wrong, electrifying Leeds to Sheffield and Manchester to Sheffield in due course are good things to do. But this new Northern Powerhouse Rail is a far cry from the vision of a decade ago. And reading the small print of the government's recent announcements makes it clear everything is subject to business case approval and affordability in future spending reviews. No wonder there is plenty of cynicism flying around. However, NPR is for another day and another team. Right now, the Transpennine Route Upgrade team, while delivering some NPR provisioning work, are fully focused on delivering the whole TRU programme. That's not yet fully funded though, and so we return to the theme of needing to fund the whole project through to the end to deliver all the benefits.
I think the BCR is there's a lot of BCR elements around the freight, so the freight's really important to us as a BCR overall. It will still be probably above 1. However, what I would say is that you'll get some improvement in the connectivity and get some improvement in the actual journey times. But the reliability, because the final section itself, which is the Huddersfield to Staley Bridge, would still be existing infrastructure, you might not get that reliability that will really make the difference. So I think there are definite improvements, even with the funding level we have, but this programme needs full funding, and also there are parts of the network also need to be improved outside of TRU, such as at parts of York, Leeds and Manchester in particular, and they unlock the full potential of the actual scheme itself.
I do feel for the project team at TRU. They keep going, they keep delivering, they keep showing many other major schemes how to do it, yet they don't get much recognition for it. I suspect it's the downside of being on time and on budget. Good news doesn't sell newspapers, only bad news does that. I have no idea whether the NPR the government talked about on the 14th of January will ever see the light of day. Personally, I'm a little sceptical. I think something will happen between Manchester and Liverpool, and I desperately hope something is done between Birmingham and Manchester to extend HS2 north, in some form at least, even if it's not the original vision. That may result in a new station at Manchester, although even there the planners would be well advised not to overcomplicate matters. And bits of electrification in Yorkshire will undoubtedly happen too. But I can't help but think that Northern Powerhouse Rail is being built as we speak. We just call it Transpennine Route Upgrade. Whatever the final design of NPR, at its core would always be a big upgrade between Manchester, Leeds and York, and that's what they're doing. So I asked Tricia and James what they are most proud of so far, and what's keeping them awake at night.
I think the customer satisfaction is got to be what we're most proud of,
Right.
because that's a foundation we can build on for the future. There's loads of examples of things that we would be proud of, the station upgrades, the electrification, but I think in terms of that advocacy, that is really, really hard won. So that can give us a foundation for future. I just went straight to Neville Hill closure when we were talking about looking ahead. You know, we've got a complex fleet, we've got a complex number of stabling locations, and Neville Hill, just outside Leeds, is probably one of the biggest across the country, really. So if Neville Hill doesn't work, you know, the network doesn't work, and as a result of Transpennine Route Upgrade, it will be closed for about 12 weeks. So looking ahead to that, we can't, you know, that's got to involve the whole enterprise, really, which is what will keep me awake at night.
So most proud of is actually the way we're working and coming together. We have a fantastic capability that we brought together, but the thing that's making the real difference is actually how we have become the enterprise, and we've put, you know, in essence, the real desire to improve things in the north at the heart of how we make decisions and how we make decisions for passengers. That team is working in just a very different way, and its mindset's changed. And I'm very proud of the fact that that's come together, and it's actually making that difference. What keeps me awake at night? I think it's a very similar answer to Trish, because it's about how do we do all this work and actually make sure we can keep this infrastructure moving and we can keep passengers at the centre of how we deliver the railway. It is extremely complex. It's very, very rare. In fact, I don't think anywhere we've delivered this amount of infrastructure in a live environment in this way, and keeping those passengers on the network, on the service, is really important, and keeping the network moving.
And as a team, as an enterprise, this is all being done extremely professionally, working in a genuinely collaborative partnership of Network Rail, Northern, Transpennine Express and others. I really do hope they finish the whole lot. I'd love to see electric trains whizzing through Saddleworth at some point. Sure, it may not be a brand new line as was originally envisaged, but I still think it would be a transformed line, fit for the 21st century. Perhaps there are benefits to staying under the radar after all.